Bleach episode 19 adapts a considerable amount of manga material continuing on from the end of chapter 565, which showcased the end of Mask vs Renji's battle from last week's episode. This week we have around 7 chapters worth of manga material adapted, spanning from chapters 554 to 570. The episode begins with material from chapter 554 to 555, which covers Ichigo leaving the royal palace and making his call with Kisuke Urahara. Then after the intro song, we have material from chapter 559 of Kangdu and BG9's execution, which is streamlined to include talking points from chapter 565 between Hashward and Uryu. And lastly, we have a stretch of 5 chapters spanning from chapter 566 to 570, which adapts the Rukia vs Asnod battle into the anime, including a post-credit scene which sets up the next episode with Yachiru and Isane being confronted by the Stenritter Guana Lee. There is quite a lot of streamlining of events within this week's episode, with whole scenes being reworked in order to fit the new continuity that the anime is establishing around Uryu's character in particular. So as always, I'm going to refrain from talking about any scenes which are one-to-one adapted from the manga, and I'm going to solely focus on what has been cut, changed and added to the anime. There is a lot to dive into, so without further delay, here is my manga versus anime comparison for episode 19 of Bleach's 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. Episode 19 begins by adapting material from chapter 555 after Ichigo completes his training with Ichibei and acquires his Oken clothing from Senjumaru. Unfortunately, the cut material from Renji and Rukia's meeting with Senjumaru was not reworked for Ichigo, so it remains omitted from the anime. Now the material from chapter 555 is streamlined and reworked. The first difference occurs after Ichigo tells Kirinji that he is ready. A few panels from the manga are cut and replaced by a new interaction. The anime decides to have Ichigo complain about his clothing to Senjumaru. Kirinji and Kiryu are also present here, and on a side note, Kiryu is present from the very beginning of this scene, in comparison to the manga where she appears later on just as Ichigo leaves. Now in the anime, Ichigo asks if his clothing is a bit much, because he feels like he is unnecessarily overdressed. Senjumaru explains to him that the clothing that she has made will help him to pass through the 72 layers of protection that exist between the royal palace and the Soul Society. She then sarcastically questions if he still thinks that his clothing is not necessary. The anime ended up including this scene instead of Ichigo looking around, which is in the manga, and asking where the pillar is that they had rode up to the royal palace on. Kirinji tells him that it's not here, before telling him that he is traveling back to the Serite on foot, to which Ichigo reacts in shock. Kirinji reassures him not to be surprised as he tells Senjumaru to summon the stairs. The anime removes all of this and instead has Senjumaru summon the stairs after she tells Ichigo about his clothing. The anime does a fantastic job of animating the stairs materializing in thin air, and it fantastically conveys to us the scale of Ichigo's journey that he is about to embark on. One thing to note about this scene that occurs at the beginning of the episode is the demeanor of Ichigo. There is a big change in how the anime depicts Ichigo in comparison to the manga. The manga has him overreacting in some panels and joking around. However, the anime is consistent in ensuring that Ichigo remains calm and collected, not letting anything affect his frame of mind. This is demonstrated by how he reacts in the anime in comparison to the manga in response to Kirinji telling him that it will take a week for him to get back to the Serite. In the manga, Ichigo exclaims a week and he panics that the Quincy will have already started their attack within that time. The anime cuts this out and skips to the next panel where Ichigo calms himself down and says that everything should be still alright. The anime cuts some dialogue from Kirinji asking if Ichigo is sure because it's a long journey, and Ichigo argues back with him that he had just said that it wasn't that far. The anime instead skips to the next panel where we hear Ichigo explain how it will only take him half a day to return to the Serite if he rushes. This is again the anime streamlining scenes in order to ensure that important details are conveyed without adapting redundant lines that exist to pad out the manga chapters. After Ichigo calmly explains how he will get back faster, some panels of Kirinji reacting and Ichibei laughing in the distance are cut from the anime. Ichigo remains level-headed until Ichibei tells him that the Quincy had attacked 3 hours ago, which I think is way more effective as the anime remains consistent by conveying to us how much Ichigo has changed by not letting the taunts of the Zero Division get to him. He only yells after he learns that he is running late. This helps us to appreciate the comments made by the Zero Division later, when they speak about how much Ichigo has grown since he had arrived within the Royal Palace. Speaking of these comments, the anime also streamlines these remarks from the Zero Division. After Kiryu throws the food to Ichigo, a line of dialogue where he tells her that he will eat the food if he gets hungry in the middle of a battle is cut from the anime. A couple of panels are cut from the anime where Kiryu comments on Ichigo having gotten so much stronger that she sees a visible change in comparison to how he was when they had first met him, noting that his spiritual pressure was so shaky at the start. The anime instead shows a streamlined scene of Ichibei explaining how Ichigo has become a true Shinigami now. Ichibei's lines are also streamlined, with the anime removing a lot of the rambling that is present within the manga, because he goes back and forth with his choice of words to describe Ichigo's change, but the anime just cuts to the chase. We then cut to material that wasn't adapted into earlier episodes from the end of chapter 554, with Urahara receiving a call from Ichigo. The scene is then continued in chapter 555 when Ichigo reassures Urahara to hold out a little bit longer until he gets there. This is superbly adapted from the manga, and I love that the anime had kept this scene because it highlights the maturity of Ichigo. This is the culmination of his long journey to learn and accept the truth about his mother, as well as acquiring his true Zanpakuto and succeeding Ichibei's trial. He now calls Urahara, who reacts surprised, which indicates that he can feel a change in Ichigo just by hearing his voice. This is just superb, and I just wanted to fangirl over this moment, which the anime does a great job of getting right. After the intro song, we continue with Hashwald's conversation with Uryu, which is adapted from chapter 565, as the context and dialogue from this exchange is altered and reworked to include the execution of Kangdu and BG9 from chapter 559. The most notable changes between the anime and the manga is Uryu accompanying Hashwald, in comparison to the manga where Hashwald passes judgment on them with Yhwach beside him. The execution scene in the anime cuts all of the dialogue from BG9 and Kangdu as they remain silent. There are several differences in comparison to the anime and the manga for this scene in particular, so I'm going to begin by talking about the anime version before explaining how the manga had handled the execution of Kangdu and BG9. In the anime, Hashwald tells Uryu to come with him as we get some amazing anime-only visuals of the inside of Silburn, with the blue flames lighting up the passageways of the castle. We then see Hashwald and Uryu walk past a row of soldiers as they stand in front of Kangdu and BG9, who are kneeling on the ground, as one of the soldiers states that judgment will now be passed on to those who were defeated in battle. Uryu watches as Hashwald raises his blade in the air and strikes Kangdu, as the Sternritter Grandmaster then recalls that Kangdu has the Shrift ability the Iron, stating that he should thank his good fortune, but the scale of a battle must be fair. He explains that lives that were saved by good fortune will be removed by an equivalent amount of misfortune. The streamlined anime scene adapts Hashwald's scales tipping, as Kangdu reacts in fear, utterly speechless, as Hashwald cuts him down effortlessly, bypassing his ability the Iron. He then goes on to eliminate BG9 with Uryu watching on in horror. The execution within the manga was very different because it takes place over 5 pages from chapter 559. It begins with Yhwach ordering Hashwald to pass judgment on the 2 defeated Sternritter. The manga panels involving BG9 pleading for his life are removed from the anime when he tells them that they have only temporarily lost, and that the 2 of them can still be of use to Yhwach because they were revived by the activation of their holy forms. In addition to BG9 pleading, the manga panel where Yhwach states that they were fortunate to have escaped death is also cut from the anime. Hashwald's dialogue about lives being saved by good fortune needing to be removed by a same amount of misfortune occurs before he strikes Kangdu in the manga. The manga emphasizes BG9 panicking, which isn't included in the anime. The manga has Kangdu reminding Hashwald of his ability the Iron, and this is after Hashwald appears to be surprised that his attack didn't cut Kangdu. And this is in contrast to the anime where Hashwald is already aware of what has happened, as he explains that Kangdu's Shrift ability had stopped the attack. In the manga, Kangdu taunts Hashwald to attack him again, as he exclaims that he will not be killed by anyone other than Yhwach. These lines of dialogue are cut from the anime, and unfortunately the anime heavily streamlines this scene, but on the other hand it does a fantastic job of giving us our first glimpse of Hashwald's Shrift ability, the Balance. Following the execution scene, Hashwald Hashward continues speaking to Uryu in the anime, and the conversation is centered around the nature of Yhwach, with dialogue taken from chapter 565 but reworked slightly to fit the new context and tone of the scene. Like last week, there is less hostility towards Uryu here, and more importantly, Hashward does not suspect him to have joined the Quincy for the purpose of avenging the death of his mother after Yhwach had casted Ashwaunen over 9 years ago. In the anime, Hashward reacts to Uryu's surprised expression after the execution, saying that he doesn't seem to understand what is going on, explaining that everyone who has been gifted a piece of Yhwach's soul will have their powers returned to Yhwach after they die. After regaining these powers, Yhwach will grow stronger. Uryu, in an anime-only line, tells Hashward that the 2 Sternritter that he had just cut down were valuable assets to Yhwach's army. Was it necessary to have taken their lives? Hashward states that Yhwach decides what is necessary and unnecessary, explaining to him that Uryu had acquired his own shrift from Yhwach after partaking in the engraving ritual where he had drank Yhwach's blood. He explains that fighting is Yhwach's means of living, when Hashward states that if Yhwach doesn't continue absorbing souls, the next line is muted in the anime. But in the manga, we are aware that Hashward finishes his sentence here by saying that Yhwach will eventually return back to a state where he is unable to see, hear or move. The anime decides to keep this vague as it streamlines the explanation of the nature of Yhwach from chapter 565. I'm sure that the anime will include a lot of this cut content from the end of chapter 565 into future episodes. Chapter 565 also features Hashward explaining how Yhwach's powers work. The anime cuts mentions of Yhwach's past as the manga chapter explains that Yhwach had the power to share his soul with those around him ever since he was a child. This is then compared to how ordinary Quincy have the power to gather reishi from their surroundings and to manipulate it into their own power. Yhwach, on the other hand, has an opposing power. He has the ability to share his soul with others. The manga explains how he had shared his soul via touch when he was younger, and he then discovered a more efficient method to share his soul, which involves engraving letters onto other souls. And this allows for a deeper, more powerful part of his soul to be shared with others. I mentioned this earlier, but the anime removes Hashward's confrontation here where he reveals his suspicions to Uryu. This again is in line with the anime deciding to expand upon Uryu's role, convincing us that he is a fully fledged member of Yhwach's army, with Hashward being lenient towards him in the anime, which I prefer a lot more in comparison to how this exchange was handled within the pages of the manga. The scene ends with Hashward's final line muting as the rest of chapter 565 is not adapted, where we see Yhwach awakening from his sleep. The anime then cuts to material from chapter 566, but it removes 2 scenes which span across 5 pages from the beginning of this chapter. The first is of Rukia and Renji falling from the royal palace, traveling to the Serete, as Rukia advises Renji to hide after each battle so that the enemy doesn't have a chance to ambush him. The second scene involves Renji waking up from a nap after having defeated Mask, stating that he thinks that he has hidden long enough, but we then see the Sternritter Nanana behind a pillar who appears to have been observing him this entire time. All of this is not included within the anime, as we are instead shown Rukia traveling across the battlefield. A panel from the manga where Rukia comments on how she was able to sense the spiritual pressure of Isane is cut from the anime, and then subsequent shots of Isane healing Kensei and Rose are also removed. This is because of the anime only scene that we had last week where Rukia was shown to drop off the 2 captains to Isane during Renji's battle against Mask. The remainder of chapter 566 is faithfully adapted into the anime. After Rukia activates the true form of Sodono Shirayuki, a few panels of Aznot commenting on her confidence are cut from the anime. In the manga, after Aznot fires several spikes at her in response to her challenging him to try to attack her again, he reminds her that she was running away from his attacks just a moment ago. The anime instead cuts to the panel where Rukia explains how her body needed to become accustomed to Sodono Shirayuki's true power. Aznot's explanation of fear and relief from chapter 567 is accompanied by some amazing anime exclusive visuals which frighteningly bring his words to life, as he explains how relief is tied to life and fear is tied to death. I really love the addition of these visuals, which do a great job of emphasizing the theme of Aznot's character. Additionally, during this scene we get some really revealing imagery of Rukia, which I think Taguchi and the anime staff had attempted to make up for Rukia's Pete scene, which was removed from Core 1 and I know had disappointed a lot of people. At the end of chapter 567, after Rukia freezes Asnod with her absolute zero ability, scenes of Asnod wondering if this is sphere are cut from the anime. After Rukia slowly restores her body temperature from absolute zero and Asnod reveals that he has survived her attack from chapter 568, we then cut to Asnod's backstory, which is adapted from chapter 570, but it's been rearranged into the anime to happen earlier on in comparison to the manga. During Asnod's backstory, a manga panel revealing a German Bible on his bedside drawer is cut from the anime. After Yuhobak arrives and states that he will bestow power upon him, we cut to a visual of the letter F, referencing the Shrift ability the Fear which Asnod was granted. After this, we cut back to material from chapter 568 with Asnod breaking free from being frozen solid. After Asnod tells her that it is useless to attack because she won't reach him because her feet are cringing, a panel of Rukia responding is cut from the anime. She asks if he is suggesting that her body is starting to feel fear, stating that it can't be because her body is, but then she ends up being interrupted by Asnod. This panel is cut for the sake of streamlining the dialogue, and Rukia doesn't really say anything of significance here anyway. When Rukia attempts to close her eyes to stop her optic nerves from being affected by the Sternritter's powers, we get another amazing anime-only scene of Ichigo, Orihime and Byakuya with their faces decomposing, and this is similar to what Byakuya had imagined during his battle against Asnod when he had seen the face of Rukia decomposing. Rukia is also covered in flies, similar to how Byakuya was, as the feeling of fear being instilled within her is emphasized within the anime via these impactful anime exclusive visuals. These additions really build upon the manga, improving on the source material massively, with the amazing voice acting from Asnod combined with these all new scenes. After Byakuya arrives to help Rukia, we cut to the mid-card, which occurs really late into this week's episode. The first half of the episode adapts up to the end of chapter 568, leaving about 2 chapters of manga material to be adapted into the rest of the episode. A manga panel from the start of chapter 569 of Rukia thinking to herself that Asnod had challenged her in order to lure out Byakuya is cut from the anime. Instead, we cut to her warning Byakuya not to look into his eyes. Byakuya acknowledging Rukia was adapted incredibly from chapter 569. I love the expression of Rukia's eyes here, as we really feel how impactful Byakuya's heartfelt words were. They truly mean a lot to her. With Rukia affirming that she doesn't hold any fears right now, the outro song begins to play as we are treated to a phenomenal scene involving the activation of Rukia's Bankai, with Rukia affirming that she doesn't hold any fears right now, with the music, visuals and incredible voice acting of Rukia's voice actor as she says Haka no Togame, which in all honesty left me utterly speechless. The anime really does an amazing job of capturing the scale of Rukia's attack, which engulfs the surroundings, instantly freezing Asnod. During the credits, we get the first half of chapter 570 adapted, with Byakuya complimenting Rukia's Bankai and advising her to handle it with care. This was a deeply emotional scene. It really had me welling up with tears seeing how far Rukia has come, and seeing the resolution of Byakuya and Rukia's bond, which started out so flawed but now is perfectly wrapped up with Byakuya acknowledging her and complimenting how far she has come. I honestly couldn't stop smiling throughout all of this amazing scene. How great did Rukia's Bankai look at the end of the episode? They did so much justice to it that it really does fit the title of one of the most beautiful Bankai within all of the Soul Society. Following the resolution of Rukia's battle against Asnod, we begin the next major encounter as the post-credit scene of episode 19 adapts material from the second half of chapter 570. This is adapted faithfully from the manga, aside from one manga panel that is cut from the anime, and it involves Yachiru exclaiming that the Quincy have some nice bedding, as Isane tells her that she is talking too loudly. The episode ends with the introduction of Sternritter v the Vanishing Point Guanal Lee, who confronts both Isane and Yachiru, with episode 19 having adapted all the way up to the end of chapter 570. Episode 19 was really intense. There were a lot more changes to some scenes than I was expecting, like Senjumaru being given new lines of dialogue at the start of the episode, with Ichigo leaving the royal palace being streamlined, and then Kangdu and BG9's execution being trimmed down to make room for this calm exchange between Hashward and Uryu. Despite all of this cramming in of material, I really think that the anime did a lot of justice to Rukia's battle against Asnod. It was terrifying, emotional and jaw-dropping, with the way that Asnod's fear was showcased, with the frightening anime exclusive visuals, and not to mention the contrastingly beautiful Bankai of Rukia, which ended the battle on a really high note, allowing us to see the amazing conclusion to Byakuya and Rukia's story, which began all the way back in the Soul Society arc. Episode 19 was truly dedicated to Rukia, and I really think that the anime staff exceeded all of our expectations with this surreal episode. What were your thoughts about episode 19, The White Haze? Did you enjoy the episode as much as I did? There were several changes in comparison to the manga, with material being adapted from multiple different chapters, with it being evident that scenes are being meticulously rearranged in order for the new Bleach anime to tell an altered, more expanded version of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, which builds upon what Kubo has established within the manga. I am really excited for episode 20, which will feature the return of a very popular Shinigami who is going to be battling an absolutely unhinged Sternritter, so you definitely don't want to miss next week's episode titled I Am the Edge. In the meantime, be sure to continue the discussion about this week's episode in the comments. I look forward to reading all of your thoughts of the all-new Bleach 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. Lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.